Well, but that's because they don't have a through line. Like they don't have a visible through line. It's like having a it's like having a wig with no glue. Shout out to the Gorilla Glue Girl.
Wow.
What's up, everybody? My name is Michael Stephenson. Welcome to my YouTube channel. You are currently watching my art/entertainment industry series in which I talk mostly about film and television with a little bit of sprinkling of music as well as book publishing in there. I would ask that if you are, or if this is the first time that you are visiting my channel, that you please go back and watch some of my beginning videos in this Hollywood is Broken series. I am trying to build a particular lingo or language here on the channel, and viewing those videos are sort of foundational videos in which I talk about various things, and I form that language and lingo so that I can just use shorthand in which I could just say the Avatar era or the Lost effect, and you will know exactly what I'm talking about, and I won't have to re-explain those particular ideas. Tonight, that is going to actually be incredibly important because we are going to be talking about Marvel through lines. I've already done a video on through lines in general in which I used Marvel's Infinity Saga as an example of what a through line and what a good through line is. So I'm going to be referencing some stuff, and hopefully you guys will just be able to keep up if you haven't seen those videos. But I would strongly advise that you go back and watch those videos. Okay, so with that being said, and if this is your first time here, I will also say that I'm a writer, so I'm coming at this from a writer's perspective. Okay, so with that being said, we talk about the technique, the writing technique of having a through line in a story or a conglomeration of stories like what the MCU is. And in my original through lines video, I talked about how Marvel had a strong through line for the entirety of the Infinity Saga, from the first Iron Man all the way to Endgame, to and through Endgame, of course. Their through line was specifically that of Tony Stark becoming Iron Man. Now, again, I've said multiple times that, you guys, you have a sort of layman's terminology about this. You will say that Tony was the foundation of it, or Tony/Iron Man was Marvel, he was the MCU, etc., etc. All of those things, all of that sort of terminology is really referring back to the idea of the through line that they had. Essentially, what happened in the MCU from Iron Man to Endgame is that almost every single story that they told in some way was in service of telling Tony's own story, his journey to become Iron Man. Now, when I say Iron Man, I don't just mean, of course, putting the suit on and becoming that character, but more so, it's the idea of him becoming the man that he truly not only wants to be, but that he truly believes he can be, and that others might not see in him, but that is inside of him nonetheless. And so I said that in that video, if you look at almost every other film within the saga, you will find that, especially for the leads of those films, almost everyone, each of them in some way, shape, or form, not only bear a resemblance to Tony's own story, but that each of the characters are an avatar, so to speak, of a particular part or personality trait of Tony. So Thor is essentially Tony's partying, let loose, wild, sort of boy-like side personified. Captain America is the avatar of what he sees as basically the man that he wants to be. He's in some ways a perfect modeling of who Tony kind of wants to be. Remember, Captain America / Steve Rogers was one of the few men that his father, Tony's father, Howard Stark, admired, talked about frequently, from what we get from the movies and the shorts and stuff that we have. the TV shows and stuff like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He talked about him quite often. And he actually is one of the few men that Howard sort of looked up to. He respected Captain America. In some ways, the reason why Tony wants to be more like a Captain America kind of character is because he wants to be able to be the type of man that his father would have been proud of. And so the entirety of the Infinity Saga continues to show Tony's struggle even through other characters. The other characters become models of different things that Tony is feeling or that Tony is going through. Same thing with Guardians of the Galaxy with Star-Lord and his father Ego. Tony is seeking out a way to become this thing that not only his father, if his father were still alive, would approve of, but to also become this thing that is in some ways elevated beyond what he thinks he is. All of his actions sort of serve to push him to become, or to push him to, in some ways, drop off some of the avatars, to not be as much like Thor as he has been before, not to be that sort of partying type, to be more fatherly as he was to Spider-Man, Peter Parker in Homecoming. And of course he was more fatherly before he even became a father himself with the 5-year time jump. To be more open to being the man who does jump on the grenade, or in this case, to jump in and grab the gauntlet, grab the stones off of the gauntlet and sacrifice himself. His discussion and his ultimate talk with his father when he does go back in time, that's the reason as to why it's so important, is because it's one of the last pins or one of the last resonance points in the through line. Now, I've already done a video on resonance points as well. In that, I also used Marvel's MCU for resonance points to show the 3 main resonance points, or at least the 3 biggies, that of emotional, narrative, and thematic. So I'm going to be talking about that as well, just in case you guys don't know. So, like I said, I'm not going to repeat or try to explain that again. So because that through line is so incredibly strong and is essentially intrinsic, it is ingrained within almost every film of the entire Infinity Saga, whether it's Black Panther or the Captain America series, the Thors, obviously the Iron Mans themselves, the Guardians of the Galaxy. It creates this idea of connective tissue, even if the connective tissue is not necessarily there. You go back and if you watch the first entire phase, honestly, Iron Man, Iron Man 2, Captain America, and Thor, it can very much so feel disconnected from each other. Like, yes, it has, each one of them have the end after credit scenes to sort of try to create some connective tissue there, but they can very much so feel disconnected from each other. But the thing that connects them is the fact that that through line is established so early on. Again, we get 2 Iron Man films before we get those other films. And in the second Iron Man film, the whole point of the film is that they're establishing this idea of Tony really looking up to his father and really having a complex, complicated relationship with both himself as well as his father, as well as the expectations that his father had for him. So as he pushes through the series, he is slowly but surely, in many different ways, living up to those expectations and changing into the man that he should be, changing into a true Iron Man. And it's not the suit that makes him, but it is the change, the emotional changes, the growth that makes him into this character. So that's the strong through line that, again, it acts like a glue throughout the entire Infinity Saga. So what then is the problem with the latest films, Phase 4, Phase 5? The biggest problem, honestly, is not even that they don't have good after credit scenes to connect everything or anything like that. The biggest problem is that they don't really have a clear and visible through line. There's almost nothing that seems to be a theme or a repeated narrative structure or like there's almost no resonance points between the different films. You can't really tell where exactly they're going because you can't tell where they're building to. See, a through line is not only a glue, but the best thing about the through line is that it allows an audience to have something that they can follow. It's almost like a path through all these different stories. The audience, the consumer, can follow that through from this is where we started to this is where we're going. And these are all the stops along the way. You don't really have that in the MCU right now. There doesn't seem as if there is one big conglomerate journey that anyone is going on for any of the resonance points, whether it is thematic or emotional or narrative. And none of it seems to really connect nor mirror or reflect almost anything. It just seems like there's a bunch of individualized, unconnected stories because there is no through line. Put it in the simplest terms here, a through line can actually help to center the story on one specific thing. But with Tony gone, there's just sort of, as I said, it just sort of feels like a large bargain bin of DVDs, right? It just a bargain bin of DVDs, bargain bin of different stories that don't connect. So then where do we go and how does the MCU fix this? Well, for starters, they need a through line. Now, the through line that they should have, and well, I don't really know where to start with this. The through line that they should have is one that I've been thinking of for a while, and maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit in saying that they don't have a through line because they certainly have setups for this through line for the new MCU post Endgame. They definitely have set this up multiple times in films. So maybe it is a through line. The problem is that it's just not strong enough. Sorry, that's my remote. The problem is that it hasn't been strong enough for fans to really latch onto and to look at it and say, okay, yes, there are multiple different stories, but this is the real story that we're supposed to truly be watching and engaged in and emotionally connected to. And so let me also mention that before I say this through line, this was actually already called out and some of y'all like laughed online. I do know I saw both a Reddit, at least 2 Reddit posts and a Twitter thread or an X thread, whatever, about this where you guys were making fun of it, but it actually is the through line that they should go with. And that is the power of both love and family. Now, again, as I said, I saw people making fun of this because of the fact that Kang was essentially defeated in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania by the power of love, family, and a whole lot of ants. So some people were like, oh, that was just the dumbest thing ever. And yet, if it's done right, it actually should be the thing that they go with. And so let me tell you why. And this is, let me also say this. This is not only why I believe that they should continue to keep Kang and this saga for phase 4 and phase 5, the whole thing about making this saga, the Kang saga, they should have invested a little bit more in not only showing Kang, but specifically in setting up the through line for Kang. Because this through line, it works not only for Kang, for the villain, the ultimate villain, but it works also for the hero groups that we have as well. So going back to the Iron Man through line all the way through the Infinity Saga, one of the key points of that saga that you actually see is that of Thanos in Infinity War and Endgame. The fact that Tony is trying to be his best self so that ultimately he can not only be the son that his father, and of course his mother as well, you know, they brought in his mother as a character in Captain America Civil War and show how much she loved him. But, you know, a lot of people, they seek the approval and respect of their fathers, and they get the love from their mothers. But still, not only is he fighting to be the man that his father thinks that he could be or that he should be, etc., and to get that respect even though his father is dead, but he's also fighting in some ways to be the man that he knows his father would have been to him, or to be the kind of father that his dad both was to him, as well as to improve upon that whole paradigm, that whole idea. So he wants to be just as good of a man as Howard Stark, and he wants to be an even better father than Howard Stark. That through line is, of course, flipped on its head when we get to Thanos, who is the ultimate villain of the Infinity Saga. And this, of course, is the great reason as to why both of them essentially dying together. You know, Iron Man has to sacrifice himself in order to kill or to get rid of Thanos, is because Thanos stands as the one and antithesis. He is the antithetical avatar for Tony Stark's Iron Man character. Thanos in Infinity War demonstrates what it is to be the bad father. Yes, he has the same kind of, and is on the same kind of mission, so to speak, of Tony Stark, but where Tony is trying to save everything that he has and to protect everything, Thanos doesn't care. He will sacrifice everything in order to do what he thinks is the right thing. And of course, this then flips in Endgame. When Tony finally does have a daughter, he decides, instead of Thanos, unlike Thanos, who decides to sacrifice his daughter or to sacrifice his children in general, because he don't care about Nebula either, Tony decides to sacrifice himself in order to save his daughter. Thanos, of course, is the antithetical avatar. He's finally the one being who is almost everything that he both shares things with Tony. He shares certain ideas and certain character traits with Tony, and yet at the same time, he is the complete antithesis of Tony and who Tony would want to be. So his sacrifices are different. Everything just feels different from his lens, through his lens. So then again, we go back to what the through line should have been for the MCU. Now, let me be clear about this. This is the thing that I would have worked on, that I would have written or advised Kevin Feige and the others to work on. And as I said, they've already laid some foundational groundwork for this. So maybe this is supposed to be the through line. The problem is that I think they've already, in many ways, unfortunately messed it up. And they messed it up. It's not that I feel like they should not have included certain dialogues in some of the films that they've had in Phase 4 and 5. So let me first back up and say that again, I would still love to play Kang. I still have a Kang video out there. Maybe that could go viral. I would love to audition for the role of Kang. I'm dead serious. I'm an actor, so would love to do that. But as I said, I'm an actor, but I'm also a writer. And so this is some of the stuff that I would have tried to implement, suggested, whatever, in the MCU. So as I said, going back to what the through line should be, it should be love and family, or specifically how to create a family. So if you know anything about Kang, and this is something that would have made Kang far more of an interesting character, even going into Kang Dynasty. And this is something also that, like, I keep seeing a lot of stuff like they should do Doctor Doom, they should do Doctor Doom. Kang fits better with this through line as well, as opposed to Doctor Doom. So if you know anything about Kang, and I strongly recommend, I want to say that I might link the video. It's not my video though, so I don't know, the rules on YouTube of that. But there's a video on YouTube that it goes through. It's like a 20-minute video, mind you. So it's a little, well, my videos are much longer than that, but it's long to some people. But it's about a 20-minute video that goes through one of the most, or sort of puts together one of the most poignant storylines for Kang. And it begins with Kang Kang going through time to find a younger version of himself, a younger variant of himself. Now, we don't necessarily know if this younger version is a variant from another universe, another verse in the multiverse, or if he just travels straight back through time and he is talking to a younger version of himself. So the comic almost doesn't really make that clear, which is kind of great from a creative standpoint. But he takes his younger self, saves him first, and then takes him back through time to like dinosaur times, I think, maybe even earlier than that. It's like 65 million years or something like that. And he starts to teach him. At some point in that story, they zoom forward to, I want to say it's ancient Egypt or somewhere in there. Yeah, it's ancient Egypt because he plays a pharaoh or a king, which is one of the variants that you saw at the end of Ant-Man and Wasp: Quantumania. He was like, in the pharaoh Egyptian headdress, all that stuff. Which, by the way, I've seen multiple articles. This is an aside, but I've seen multiple articles online talking about how at the end of Loki season 2, that everybody thought that Ravonna was sent to the place beyond time, and it's like, no, y'all realize that the place beyond time, or the place at the end, that's gone. Loki is there. He's the one who's holding the tree together. That was the place. That place no longer exists now. So she couldn't have been sent there. And then on top of that, there was literally a pyramid in the background. I'm assuming she was sent to ancient Egypt. That would also align with the storyline for Kang. I don't know why, because I feel like I saw that on Screen Rant somewhere. And I'm like, what? This is not a good interpretation of where she ended up. I know that the tinting is purple, so it feels like she's in the place where the variants that were pruned would usually go. But again, that place is not supposed to exist anymore. It's not supposed to exist anymore because he who remains is no longer there to trim that or anything. Like, that was a place that existed solely because the sacred timeline had a legitimate end. The timelines have no end anymore. So it's like, I don't know. It just bugged me that they went there specifically. And I'm like, that just doesn't even play into the storyline. It seems clear that she went back to ancient Egypt. I digress. But in any case, Ravonna Renhunter, she and Kang actually do meet in an ancient Egypt version in which they stage, I believe, a coup of some kind against another variant of him that is actually ruling over this particular Egyptian city or what have you. And therein is where the story can go, and therein is where the through line can both start and end. Number one, the MCU already has Ravonna Renhunter in it, played by the just absolutely gorgeous and fantastic actress Gugu Bathory, which oh boy, I would not mind playing Kang. I almost said against her, opposite of her. Like, I wouldn't mind that at all. Ravonna is in the comic books. She and Kang fall in love in certain timelines. Now, of course, their relationship is complicated because it doesn't last like a lot of relationships do. And therein is the first sort of love / family through line that you can have. Just as Thanos was the antithesis of almost everything that Tony / Iron Man was trying to become, you can have Kang being the antithesis of everything that the other heroes are trying to do. We've already seen him in Loki season 2. In a way, his variants were somewhat rejecting the idea of love. First, we saw it with Victor Timely, who is he's sort of seduced in some ways by Ravonna, but then also what is her name? Miss I can't remember her name. Miss Time, the clock. The clock falls in love with Kang, and now that Victor Timely is there, she's trying to in some ways fall in love with him with the variant. So she sort of steps in and gets in the way, etc., etc., and so he can't really do or move how he wants to move. But then we also see farther into the future in which He Who Remains actually did and actually was talking to his Ravana, the Ravana that we see running the TVA for quite some time as she ran it. Um, she's talking to him at the end of time, or at the place beyond time, and then he's very cold to her, and it's a break, or it's a difference in character from when he is talking to the two Lokis, to Loki and Sylvie, because he's so cold to her because he has to be, because he at one point fell in love with her, and he even erased her memory. He orders, I believe, Miss Time to erase her memory and then send her back to, or send her down to the TVA as he was creating it for the sacred timeline. So essentially, he has rejected love, and within the storyline within the comic books, it is said that Kang rejects, or he doesn't reject it, but one of the things that he warns his younger self never to do is to never fall in love. Don't fall in love. Don't try to have a family, etc., because it will go incredibly wrong. And that is one of the reasons why Kang in and of himself is such a tragic character, because of the fact that he's a bit incelish. I'm gonna be real with you. He's a bit of an incel. He doesn't take the fact that he is rejected very well, and he keeps jumping through time and space to different multiverses, to different verses within the multiverse, trying to, in some ways, not become the Kang, not become the version of him that either falls in love, or not become the version of him that loses Ravana. So then we go actually back to the heroes. So Kang would be the antithesis, in the same way that Thanos would be the antithesis of not only love, but specifically forming family. So this is why I say that maybe Marvel has been seeding this through line. It's just that most of the consumers have not fully grasped onto it, or aren't as into it, I guess. And this is why I think that there's in some ways ruining it, because they have the perfect avatar there. So what we have is that for this love/family thing, in the same way that Tony was the one who was needing to be changed, and all of the other heroes around him were avatars of various traits that he either needed to have, or that he already had, or models on who he could or should be. Captain America was the perfect model for who he wanted to be, etc. What we're seeing now in a lot of the films is that most of the superheroes, whether Spider-Man or the Marvels, Captain Marvel and the Marvels, or Galaxy, obviously Guardians of the Galaxy, and even the Elementals, all of them are in some ways either falling in love and or trying to form a family unit of some sort. This is also one of the reasons, I think, as to why not only does the MCU want to go a little bit younger, which again, y'all can check out my MC Youth video. I think that it's a good thing, but it's probably also why they're adding so many younger characters in, because Doctor Strange now, all he needs is a woman, or any mate or significant other by his side, and he would have sort of a makeshift family. And this is what I'm saying, is that the through line should have been how to build a makeshift family. And what we would see is that each of these individualized superheroes are struggling on how to do that. Now, we have seen that already. Spider-Man, his little love, as well, his little romance, as well as the little makeshift family that he was trying to build with MJ and the other dude. Like, I've never known that character's name, because I always want to call him Pete too, but I was like, no, they wouldn't have two Petes. That would be weird. I can't remember his name. Yeah, but again, I also don't like this iteration of Spider-Man, which I covered in my Spider-Man video, which y'all can look for that as well. But he's kind of failed at that, right? At this point in the MCU, no one knows who he is. Literally, no one knows who he is, including the Avengers. So he failed. In the Marvels, Captain Marvel has kind of failed at making her little makeshift family also. the the biggest part or the biggest component of that, Monica, is now gone, lost in a completely different verse within the multiverse. And of course, she also lost her she lost Monica's mother to cancer years ago, right? And then of course she's married to a man who she isn't really in love with, so she's struggling to build that sort of makeshift family as well. God, then we have the elementals. You talk about family strife. That's a very complex and complicated relationship that all of them have. Not only do we, at the end of the movie, not only are we separated, so all of the quote unquote family members, and like I said, I know it's not blood family, it's not blood ties, but all of the makeshift family members are separated in some way, shape, or form. The Was it Celestial literally came and just scooped up. Didn't he scoop up two of them? So he took Gemma Chan's character. I can't remember the names because I hated the Elementals, but he took that character, and he also took. I'm almost certain he took a second character, right? Or maybe he even took three of them. I'm not sure, but that family also is struggling. At this point in time, you guys should know where I'm going with this. Is that if all of these heroes are essentially the Tony Starks, right? They are the characters who need to figure out, who need to understand, who need to learn how to put together a good and proper family and build that strong family unit, that strong family bond, learn how to truly nurture love in the way. But they are all imperfect at it, just as Tony was throughout most of the Infinity Saga, until he finally fully learned, not only until he had that conversation with his own father, but until he finally was the man that Captain America said he never would be, but that he modeled himself after. Then all of these heroes in phase 4 and 5 also need to and should have a perfect modeling, in the same way that Tony had his perfect modeling in Captain America. And that therein lies the perfect avatar. Y'all know it. I mean, they literally say it all the time. Marvel's first family, Fantastic Four. So them choosing Pedro Pascal, listen, I was going to go through and actually list who I thought should have been the top choices. I had like a top 3, but I think I've forgotten the third one. One of them was Pedro Pascal, but then also I still, listen, I know that y'all didn't particularly like John. Is it John or Joe? I think it's John Krasinski. I know John didn't particularly like his version, but remember, that was a multiversal version, so he could have changed the character and still became Mr. Fantastic in a film. My whole thing was this, is that I thought that it would have been great if they did choose an elder millennial, since we've already had so many Gen Xers leading the charge when it comes to the MCU. I thought that it would have been great for them to choose someone who was an elder millennial, who was a little bit younger, right? But, sorry, one of the other ones, and y'all gonna flip, but one of the other ones that I thought would have been a actually good and inspired choice for Mr. Fantastic would have been Ryan Gosling. Now, I also had a fourth choice that was an American, but the fourth choice I forgot. Yeah, I can't remember that fourth choice. But the fact that they did go with Pedro tells me, or at least it's sending me notes, that they really do want a more God, how would I say this? They really do. Well, it seems like they have in mind. Not only do they have him as the Mr. Fantastic, but then also they're basing this in the 60s. It very much so seems like they do have in mind that they are going to go with a sort of softer Fantastic Four, in which the Fantastic Four are that perfectly modeled family unit that all of the other heroes could look to as their avatar. Again, in the same way that Tony looked to Captain America as his avatar. Now, where do I think that they have potentially already messed this through line up? Well, it's not weirdly enough, it's not in the fact that they do have some sort a few sort of families already, but more so it's in it's in the smaller details to where it feels like they've messed things up. Number one, they've already had a lot of the characters talk about how they are supposedly family, and they talked about how they're supposedly in love, and things of that nature. If you're going to have a through, you in some ways need to have you need to have it be to where the characters are really sort of damaged in some way, to where they need that perfect model to actually look at or to look for. But instead, I hate to say it, but the characters are essentially are not imperfect enough in some ways. When we look at Iron Man, when we go back to Iron Man was so incredibly imperfect, and it seemed like, yes, even though he was a superhero, when you stood Iron Man and Captain America next to each other from a moralistic and ethical standpoint, it still seemed maybe not full on night and day like the Punisher and Daredevil, maybe, but it did seem like there was a healthy gap there between the two of them and how it was that they approached the world. But again, by the end of the Infinity Saga, you're supposed to realize that that gap is almost non-existent now, and that Tony has done all of the moving, right? Captain America stood there and said, "No, you move," and Tony just skipped, walked, and jumped as far as he could toward Captain America as possible. With the new phases, these families, they're already sort of put together a little too well in some instances, that it almost doesn't feel like they really need a perfect modeling. I hate to say this, but the only one who has failed good enough is Spider-Man. Even at the very end of the Marvels, Carol is back on Earth and she's talking to what's her name, Miss Marvel, and it kind of feels like it kind of feels like she's already adopted them, and they've already adopted her into their family in some way, shape, or form. She doesn't feel as destitute as maybe I would like for her to have felt, knowing that she lost Monica, knowing that she lost this girl who, I don't know, you could call her daughter at one point, you could call her sister at one point, that faux connection that she had. She doesn't feel nearly as disconnected as maybe she should. Also, she doesn't feel as disconnected from her husband as she should. Like she's not seeking out any kind of real romantic love or anything like that, when it feels like she should be doing that. We got a lot of that in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, but who knows if they'll come back at all to begin with. This mismatch of rogues, so to speak, they made a good sort of makeshift family, but they weren't perfect. When you think of the Fantastic Four, they should be modeled again as the perfect family. But even more to the point, them picking Pedro Pascal makes me think that they are going to go with this idea. Well, first off, let me also address the other families that they do have. The fact that Shang-Chi, he does have some family there, right? He's got a best friend. His father did die at the end of that, right? I think he did. But he also has like members of his mother's family that he can turn to now, I guess. But then you also have the Black Widow crowd, which they're the Thunderbolts, basically. They are a makeshift family, right? They were sort of stuck together, trying to, in some ways, make it work. And even though Natalie is gone now, they're still going to try to make some sort of family there. And then, of course, you also have the one that actually is family, which is Ant-Man and the Wasp. But therein lies the rub, is that, again, with Ant-Man and the Wasp, yes, even though they are a family and they're a nice family unit, it doesn't feel like they are or could ever achieve the level of family perfection that all of the others could look to and turn to them for advice on how to build a better family or build a better love connection. It just doesn't feel like that, right? Scott, unfortunately, is a little too goofy when it comes to that. He doesn't feel like the kind of person that everybody is going to turn to for advice. Pedro Pascal's Mr. Fantastic essentially should be an updated version of like the Leave It to Beaver type of father. Now, again, most of you have probably never seen Leave It to Beaver. It was well before my time as well, but I've seen some episodes of it on, one of these classic streamers. The whole idea of the Leave It to Beaver father is that he's loving, he's soft, he's caring, but he also knows what he's talking about, and he cuts through some of the foolishness to get to the problem. He's the he is the perfect father that you would want to have. That is how Mr. Fantastic should come off. Same goes for Sue Storm, is that she should come off as the sort of mother figure that everybody would want to turn to, especially when you have both older and younger superheroes, right? So Doctor Strange should be able to come to Pedro and Sue and talk about his little makeshift family in the same way that Captain Marvel should be able to do the same thing and talk about her little makeshift family that she's trying to create, and missing Monica and all that stuff, etc., etc. Ben Grimm, he should feel like everybody's lovable uncle, that maybe he has some good uncle jokes, but he also is a fount of good advice, not necessarily like the family thing, but maybe just falling in love or dating or relationship advice, stuff like that, stuff that you wouldn't necessarily go to your parents for immediately, but go to a cool uncle for sure. And then of course Johnny should feel like everybody's sort of older teenage brother who yeah, he still gets into trouble a lot, but he kind of is going to teach you sort of how to enjoy life in different ways, etc., etc. They should feel like the perfect family. But as I said, it almost in some ways feels like they've already messed this through line, setting up this through line up. First off, they didn't have the Fantastic Four in there earlier. And while I am a big proponent for they don't have to do every single thing the same way that they did it before, I think that if they had the Fantastic Four in there a little earlier, it probably would have made for a stronger through line, because then everybody could see like, oh, this is really the story of this is sort of the story of the Fantastic Four, that they are the new cornerstones, that they are the new MCU, so to speak, having taken over for Tony. But then also, as I said, the fact that they've used the language and even some of the same familial things, the familial pastimes that you would normally see in a family. I believe it was in Captain Marvel. It might have been in the Marvels as well, to where they all sat down at the end of the movie and they were having a family dinner, a family meal. And I'm like, they shouldn't have done that so early. I hate to say it, but they really shouldn't have done that. Like, yes, the Avengers having shawarma and partying together, that was great. But going back to it and having Captain Marvel's makeshift family together and supping and all that stuff, no, they should have saved that for Fantastic Four. Same thing with Ant-Man and the Wasp. They could have saved that for Fantastic Four, of like, this is how you sit down and how you just have a meal with your family and just enjoy the time that you have with them and with your people, and you don't have to always be trying to make this perfect little relationship with everybody. I feel like, again, they have all the makings of a through line, but they're sort of dropping the ball, to where now, if they did go back to Kang and he came in, Kang could then be truly defeated by, and all of the heroes, as he is defeating them and as he is destroying everything, he's destroying multiverses and all this stuff, he would be the antithesis of everything that they don't want. He would have been the one who rejected love in some way, who is out here essentially alone. He has no family, and in fact he's killing or offing off other versions of himself, which is just the craziest, most sadistic thing. And he's almost against love in some way. To have him then be defeated by the pillars and the foundation and the avatars of not only perfect family but perfect love in some way, that would have been made a much stronger through line for the entirety of phase 4 and 5, and maybe even phase 6. I don't know how many phases they're really doing with this one, but that would have made a much stronger through line in the same way that Thanos, being the antithesis of Iron Man, Tony Stark, made him an even better villain. The fact that Kang would have come in and have seen all of these people trying to love on each other and be family and be supportive, and enjoyed destroying that in every way, shape, and form. Enjoy destroying that because he is so anti that kind of thing. That would have been phenomenal. And it would have added another layer into not only the character, but into all of the story arcs for the characters, as well as the different resonance points. It would have been so on theme to see him, now that Ravonna is not going to fall in love with him. It would have been so on theme to see him try desperately to, in some way, shape, or form, separate Sue from Mr. Fantastic, from Reed. So I don't know. Again, through lines can be tough because of the fact that almost every through line, when most consumers look at them, they think like, what? That just seems, or it sounds so stupid, blah blah blah, yada yada yada, or it sounds simple or overly simplistic, or it doesn't sound like something that would work. But once it does get in there, you're like, oh wow, that really worked incredibly well. So I get it. I understand the criticism lobbed at Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania that Kang was defeated by family, the power of love, and ants, and yet that is the exact way that they should have been going. It just should not have been Ant-Man and the Wasp to do it. Like it shouldn't have been Scott and his family to do that. Now, like I said, Kang is, as I mentioned in my Kang video, that's not the last that we'll see of Kang, because Kang is, in my opinion, like a virus that can stay dormant in your body for a very long time. He'll make you sick for a little while, then he'll go away, and then he'll come back and make you sick again much further into the future when you're actually older and much weaker as an individual. So they could still do it. They could still do it and have him be completely destructive to these family units. I'm just saying that it might not be nearly as strong of a through line anymore as Tony Stark's through line was for the first three phases. So I think I'm going to end it there for tonight. This is a longer video than I anticipated, so I probably shouldn't be adding more words in. I will catch you guys on the next video, hopefully. And I don't have a sign. So while I don't have an official sign off yet, I guess I should do the whole please like, comment, share, and if you so desire and you want to see more, subscribe. But more importantly, I will ask that you please go and purchase one of my books. They are mostly ebooks, and pretty much they are all under $10. See if any of my work is actually any good, if it lives up to any of the things that I'm talking about here on my channel, specifically with the entertainment industry videos. So please go purchase my books. All of my links are down below. Thank you.